Well, with the Fed out of the way, we want to start looking for some opportunities, as we alluded to just the other day in the video, for some things, particularly high beta equities, that we think have been extremely oversold. Now, again, we're looking at this from a trading perspective for now, not so much from an investing perspective. But I want to walk you guys through the Zoom, the company, the webinar or communications company, whatever you want to call it. I think they call themselves, yeah, they call themselves communications. So let's have a look at a chart and just kind of gain a little bit of perspective. I mean, this was always something for some of you guys that might be Inner Circle members. This is always the kind of stock that we said, you know what, this is really a pandemic play in terms of the magnitude of the move that the company had, basically starting in March 2020. I mean, the stock rallied 470% then, and basically it's given up all of that. So the entire sort of COVID-inspired rally is gone. And this is not the only stock that's done that. There's plenty of other COVID beneficiaries, as we sort of called these names throughout the pandemic, like Peloton, that have really done the same thing. But from a technical perspective, from a sentiment perspective, from a momentum perspective, we do think a name like Zoom could bounce here. Now, it's already had a bit of a bounce over the past week here, week over week up, or actually at the beginning of the week, up about 9%, so that's sizable. But we think there's potentially more room. I mean, just to kind of put this into perspective, our market rover, our trend following tool, had us get out of this stock in March of last year, so 1 year ago, which has been a great call. And since then, this stock is down 70%. So it's still definitely bearishly trending. So we don't want to buy it from sort of an investment perspective just yet. But we think for a trade, there's a case to be made this makes sense. Now, if you move into the daily charts, we start to see this a bit more granular, and there's a couple things of note. Again, we're basically just coming back and actually moving into support, which used to be the previous resistance up until February of 2020, and then of course in sort of March we had that liftoff as COVID really started to take a grip of the world. And so from a technical perspective, if you want to be more granular and look at sort of momentum divergence, I use a simple MACD, moving average conversion divergence indicator. And what we have, and we've had it now for some time, so this is nothing new, but we have for the past 3 months or so had what's called positive divergence, and it's I think it's getting to the point now where it's lining up with support in absolute terms on the charts. I think Zoom could be tried here for a pure trade. I think there's a very clear stop. The recent low is 93. Let's call it 94 is probably a decent level to trade against. I wouldn't be surprised if stock can rally 15, 20%. That's really not a big deal for something that's this oversold if algorithms come in and people start to chase this thing. So that's one thing we're looking at. I do want to give you a word, though, on something that we're going to do this Saturday. And we're going to look at something we call the Trade of the Decade 2.0. And the Trade of the Decade 2.0 has a lot to do with what's happening in the bond market. And I'm just going to give you a quick sort of preview of this. But if we look at the bond market right now and we see particularly this chart here, which basically gives us the long-term view of 10-year bond yields, we are starting to come back to the very upper end of a trend in bond yields that's been in place basically since the early 80s. I'm not the only one talking about this. Bill Gross, the former bond king, has mentioned this now as well. And so, when we look at some of the higher probability trades out there right now, a lot of them are in macro. And we're going to talk about this Saturday, March 19th, in a very special webinar. So spend an hour with us, not even probably 45 minutes this Saturday. We'll really make it worth your time to walk you through what we think is Trade of the Decade 2.0. We had the Trade of the Decade 1.0 happening in autumn, December 2019 into the spring of 2020. Well documented. We'll talk about that as well in case you didn't see that one. And we think the 2.0 version of that is now happening. Very excited, and it's from our perspective, it's kind of everything kind of comes together for that trade. So I look forward to seeing you guys on Saturday, March 19th. Again, that's this Saturday, and there's a link down below, depending on where you're watching this video from, to register for that free webinar. See you guys there.